Dejun had built an empire on broken bones and unbreakable loyalty, but when he ordered his black housemaid to throw a punch as entertainment for his crew, he never imagined she'd be the one to put him on his back, or that the floor would feel colder than any bullet he'd ever dodged. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride, so stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. Now let's begin. The air in the Seoul headquarters of the Dragontail Syndicate didn't smell like gunpowder or expensive cigars today. It smelled like lemon-scented floor wax and bruised egos. Karen pressed the industrial mop across the marble floor of the third-level corridor. Her movements rhythmic and deliberate. The water in the bucket had gone from clear to murky gray 2 hallways ago, but she'd learned not to waste supplies in a place where waste was measured in body bags, not budgets. 3 years she'd been here. 3 years of scrubbing blood from Italian tile, of folding $1,000 shirts with the kind of precision a surgeon would envy, of existing in the negative space between violence and its aftermath. She was a ghost in a navy blue uniform. The ruffles on her shoulders, stiff, white, absurdly ornamental, were Dejun's idea. He'd wanted his domestic staff to look distinguished, which was code for "I want my enemies to know I can afford people who iron ruffles." Karen had stopped caring about the aesthetics around month 2. Now, the uniform was just armor of a different kind. Karen. The voice echoed from the end of the hallway, sharp and expectant. She didn't flinch. Flinching was for people who hadn't spent 1,000 nights learning the difference between a summons and a threat. This was a summons. She straightened, wiped her hands on the cloth tucked into her apron, and walked toward the source. Her shoes, practical, rubber-soled, the kind that didn't click against floors, made no sound. She'd learned that too. Silence was survival. Dejun stood in the doorway of his private dojo, one hand resting against the frame, the other holding a glass of something amber and expensive. He was dressed like a man who'd been interrupted mid-photo shoot for a luxury cologne ad. Black dress shirt unbuttoned to the 3rd button, sleeves rolled to his elbows, charcoal slacks tailored so precisely they looked painted on. His hair was pushed back, still damp from a shower, and his jaw was the kind of sharp that made people forget he'd once beaten a man unconscious with a golf club. Dejun wasn't just a boss. He was a brand. And brands, Karen had learned, were all about presentation. "You rang, sir." Karen's voice was neutral, professional, the auditory equivalent of beige. Dejun's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if smiles weren't supposed to involve warmth. "Come in. I need you for something." She stepped into the dojo. It was a massive space, all primary colored mats and floor-to-ceiling mirrors, with weapons mounted on the walls like trophies. Bamboo practice swords. Nunchaku. A katana that probably cost more than Karen's entire year's salary. In the center of the room stood a dozen men, all dressed in black GIs, all built like they'd been designed by a committee tasked with creating the platonic ideal of enforcer. They were Dejun's inner circle. The ones who did the wet work. The ones whose knuckles were perpetually scabbed and whose eyes had the flat, reflective quality of men who'd seen too much and felt too little. Karen recognized most of them. Min-ho, the one with the shaved head and the scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his jawline. Jae-sung, smaller but meaner, with eyes like chips of black ice. Tae-won, who'd once laughed so hard at one of Dejun's jokes he'd cracked a rib. They were all staring at her now. "Gentlemen," Dejun said, his voice carrying the kind of theatrical flair he usually reserved for toasts and threats. "I've been thinking." Min-ho snorted. "Dangerous." The others chuckled. Dejun raised his glass in acknowledgement. "I've been thinking about efficiency. About the people we overlook. Karen here, for instance." Karen's stomach tightened. She kept her face blank. "She's been with us for 3 years," Dejun continued, circling her slowly, like a shark assessing prey. 3 years of cleaning up our messes. Literally. Blood, bourbon, the occasional intestine. She's seen it all. But here's my question. Can she do anything else? "She makes a hell of a bibimbap," Jae-sung offered, grinning. More laughter. Karen's jaw tightened, but she didn't move. Dejun stopped in front of her, his gaze sharp and assessing. You know, Karen, I've seen you scrub a floor with enough intensity to peel the lacquer off. But can you actually hit anything that doesn't require bleach? The room erupted. Minho slapped his knee, Tae-won doubled over, and even the quieter ones cracked smiles. To them, this was comedy gold. The idea of the maid, this quiet, unassuming woman who smelled faintly of disinfectant and dryer sheets, throwing a punch was absurd. Karen met Dejun's eyes. She didn't blink. "Sir," she said, her voice low and steady, "I've spent 3 years cleaning up the literal and metaphorical messes of the most violent men in South Korea. You learn a thing or two about body mechanics when you're hauling a 200-pound problem into a dumpster." The laughter faltered. Not entirely. Minho was still wheezing, but there was a shift. A flicker of uncertainty. Dejun's smirk widened. He was enjoying this. "Is that so?" He took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking to something uncomfortable. Karen could smell his cologne. Something woody and sharp, probably made from trees that only grew on one specific mountainside in Switzerland. "Tell you what," Dejun said, his voice dropping into something quieter, more dangerous. "A joke for a joke. If you can even touch my shoulder, just a tap, nothing fancy, I'll give you a month's paid vacation. Anywhere you want. Bali. Paris. One of those all-inclusive resorts with the little umbrellas in the drinks." He paused, letting the offer hang in the air. "But if you fail," he continued, his smirk sharpening into something predatory, "you polish the chrome on my entire fleet. By hand. Every Benz, every Ferrari, every custom bike. And I want to be able to see my reflection well enough to shave." The enforcers roared. The odds were laughable. Dejun was a third-degree black belt in Taekwondo, a former street fighter who'd earned his reputation by breaking bones before he'd started breaking into the big leagues. Karen was a maid. A woman who spent her days folding laundry and her nights wondering if the stain on the guest bathroom tile was wine or something worse. Minho was practically crying. "Boss, that's not a bet, that's charity." Dejun raised an eyebrow at Karen. "What do you say?" Karen looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the confidence, the swagger, the absolute certainty that this would end with her on her knees with a bottle of chrome polish and a rag. She saw a man who'd never been surprised by anyone, least of all someone he paid to clean his toilets. "Deal," she whispered. The room went still. Not quiet, still. There was a difference. Quiet was the absence of sound. Stillness was the presence of something else. Anticipation. Tension. The moment before a blade drops. Dejun's smirk didn't waver. He handed his glass to Jae-sung and rolled his shoulders, loosening up. "All right then. Let's see what you've got." He stepped onto the center mat, gesturing for Karen to follow. She did, her shoes squeaking faintly against the polished surface. Around them, the enforcers formed a loose circle, their arms crossed, their expressions ranging from amused to outright gleeful. This was entertainment. This was the halftime show. Dejun settled into a loose fighting stance, knees bent, weight balanced, hands raised but relaxed. It was the posture of someone who'd done this 1,000 times and knew exactly how it would end. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Karen didn't move. Not yet. She stood there, hands at her sides, her uniform pristine, her expression unreadable. She was calculating. Measuring. 3 years of watching these men move, watching them fight in the dojo, watching them practice their kicks and their throws and their chokes, had taught her something valuable. Everyone has a pattern. Dejun's pattern was aggression disguised as playfulness. He liked to test people, to push them just far enough to see how they'd react, and then he'd capitalize on their fear or hesitation. He was a predator who played with his food. But Karen wasn't food. She took a breath. Let it out. And then she moved. Not toward him. Not away. She shifted her weight, angling her body slightly to the left, her gaze never leaving his. It was subtle, barely noticeable. But it was enough to make Dejun's eyes narrow. "You gonna stand there all day or—" She was already inside. Dejun lunged, a lazy theatrical swipe meant to test her reflexes, to see if she'd panic and stumble backward. It was a move he'd used 100 times in this exact scenario, a move designed to end things quickly and humiliatingly. But Karen wasn't there. She'd stepped inside his guard, her body moving with the kind of economy that came from years of navigating tight spaces. Cramped storage closets, narrow hallways, the gap between a mob boss and his temper. Her hand, previously tucked neatly by her apron, shot out. It wasn't a punch. It was a strike. Calculated. Precise. Her knuckles connected with his solar plexus, the soft space just below the sternum where all the important nerves like to congregate and have meetings. Dejun's breath left his body in a single shocked gasp. And then Karen swept his legs. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of move that would make it into a movie montage. It was just her sensible rubber-soled work shoe hooking behind his designer loafer and pulling, hard and fast, while his brain was still trying to process why his lungs had stopped working. Gravity did the rest. The sound of Dejun hitting the mat was like a thunderclap in a library. Sharp. Wrong. Impossible. The dojo went silent. Karen stood over him, her ponytail still perfectly in place, her ruffles unruffled. She smoothed the white trim on her shoulder, a gesture so casual, so mundane, it felt like a slap. Dejun lay on his back, staring up at the fluorescent lights. His chest was heaving, trying to remember how breathing worked. His brain was doing something similar with the concept of reality. Around them, the enforcers were frozen. Minho's mouth was open, his laugh stuck somewhere in his throat. Jae-sung looked like he'd just watched a magic trick and couldn't figure out where the rabbit had gone. Tae-won was blinking rapidly, as if trying to reset his vision. Karen looked down at Dejun. Her expression was polite, professional, the same expression she wore when asking if he wanted his coffee black or with cream. The chrome on the Ferraris is prone to streaking if you don't use the microfiber cloths, sir, she said, her voice back to its melodic, maddeningly calm tone. But I suppose that's a problem for the new guy. She paused. I'll be in Hawaii. And then she turned and walked out of the dojo, her shoes squeaking softly against the floor, leaving behind a room full of dangerous men and one very confused mob boss who was just beginning to realize he'd made a terrible, wonderful mistake. Dejun didn't move for a full 30 seconds. It wasn't that he couldn't move, though his solar plexus was currently filing a formal complaint with his nervous system. It was that he didn't know how to move. The script had been flipped, burned, and scattered to the winds. He was supposed to be standing. Karen was supposed to be embarrassed. The enforcers were supposed to be laughing at her, not staring at him like he'd just been dethroned by a woman whose job description included knows 17 ways to remove red wine from silk. Minho was the first to break the silence. Boss, did you just... Shut up, Dejun wheezed. He rolled onto his side, then pushed himself up to his knees. His lungs were starting to remember their primary function, which was a relief, but his pride was still lying somewhere on the mat, possibly under his left shoulder blade. He stood slowly, deliberately, brushing off his slacks with the kind of careful attention a man gives to something when he's trying very hard not to acknowledge the elephant in the room. The elephant being that he'd just been laid out by his housekeeper. Jae-sung cleared his throat. Should we go after her? And do what? Dejun's voice was hoarse, but the edge was back. Apologize. Offer her a raise. She just won a month in Hawaii. Let her pack. He walked over to where Jae-sung was still holding his abandoned glass of whiskey and took it back, downing the remainder in one smooth motion. The burn helped. Not with the humiliation. Nothing short of a time machine would help with that, but with the growing realization that he'd just witnessed something remarkable. Karen had moved like water. No, not water. Water was formless. She'd moved like something with perfect, terrible form that had simply chosen to appear formless until the exact moment it mattered. Where did she learn to do that? Tae-won asked, his voice hushed, almost reverent. Dejun set the empty glass down on the edge of the mat. That's an excellent question. He'd hired Karen 3 years ago through an agency that specialized in discreet domestic services, code for people who wouldn't ask questions when they found bullet holes in the upholstery. Her resume had been sparse. Previous employment at a hotel in Lagos, a brief stint at a private residence in London, references that checked out but revealed nothing interesting. She was quiet, efficient, and had the kind of face that people forgot 5 seconds after looking at it. Perfect for a syndicate that valued invisibility in its support staff. But Dejun was starting to suspect that invisible and harmless were not the same thing. "Min-ho," he said, his voice sharp enough to cut through the collective stunned silence. "I want her file. Everything. Where she worked before, where she trained, what she had for breakfast 3 years ago. I want to know why my maid fights like she was trained by someone who actually knew what they were doing." Min-ho nodded, already pulling out his phone. On it. Dejun rolled his shoulders, testing for damage. Everything seemed intact except for his ego, which was currently in critical condition. And someone find out where she is right now. I'm guessing she's not actually packing for Hawaii yet. "She's in the kitchen," Jae-sung offered. "I saw her heading that way when she left." Of course she was. Because why would the woman who just demolished her boss in front of his entire crew do anything other than return to her regularly scheduled duties? It was the kind of power move that didn't announce itself. It just was. Dejun found himself smiling. Not the predatory smirk he usually wore, but something genuine. Something that tasted like respect. "Gentlemen," he said, addressing the room, "I think we need to have a conversation about assumptions." Karen was chopping vegetables when Dejun found her. The kitchen in the Dragontail headquarters was industrial grade. Stainless steel counters, a 6-burner stove that could handle a small restaurant, and a walk-in refrigerator that currently contained enough kimchi to survive a nuclear winter. Karen stood at the center island, her knife moving in precise, rhythmic cuts through a daikon radish. She didn't look up when Dejun entered. "You're supposed to be celebrating," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Celebrating comes after the work is done, sir." Her voice was calm, measured. The knife continued its steady rhythm. "Dinner is at 7. You have guests coming. The japchae needs another 40 minutes to marinate properly." Dejun watched her work. Her movements were economical, practiced. The same efficiency she'd demonstrated in the dojo. "You knew you'd win." "I knew the odds." Karen set down the knife and finally looked at him. Her eyes were dark, clear, and entirely unreadable. "You're a 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo. You have reach, weight, and training. But you also have patterns. You've been practicing in that dojo for 2 years, same techniques, same responses. I've mopped that floor 643 times. I've watched every session." Dejun felt something cold slide down his spine. Not fear. He'd lived with fear so long it was practically a roommate, but recognition. "You were studying us." "I was doing my job, sir. Part of doing my job well is understanding the environment." She turned back to the vegetables, scraping the cut pieces into a bowl. "You lunged left 78% of the time when engaging an opponent who wasn't actively countering. You favor your right leg by approximately 15 degrees, likely from an old injury that didn't heal correctly. And you telegraph your attacks by dropping your shoulder half a second before you commit." The cold feeling intensified. "How long have you been cataloging this?" "Since week 3, sir. Would you like tea? The oolong is fresh." Dejun laughed. He couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation. Standing in his own kitchen, having his fighting style dissected by a woman who was now offering him tea, was too much. "You're terrifying. You know that." "I'm efficient, sir." "There's a difference." Karen moved to the stove, adjusting the heat under a pot of something that smelled like ginger and garlic. "Will you be requiring anything else before I begin preparations for tomorrow's breakfast?" "Yeah." Dejun pushed off the doorframe and walked to the island, settling onto one of the bar stools. "I'm requiring an explanation. Where did you learn to fight?" Karen paused, her hand hovering over a container of sesame oil. For the first time since he'd met her, Dejun saw something flicker across her face. Not quite hesitation, more like calculation. She was deciding how much to tell him. "My father," she said finally. "He believed women should know how to protect themselves. He taught me Krav Maga, some boxing, basic grappling. Nothing fancy." "Nothing fancy," Dejun repeated, his tone dry. "You dropped me in under 3 seconds." You weren't expecting resistance, sir. Surprise is its own weapon. She poured the sesame oil into a pan, the liquid shimmering as it heated. My father used to say that the best fight is the one your opponent doesn't know they're in until it's over. Smart man, your father. He was. Past tense. Karen's voice didn't change, but Dejun caught it. He worked private security in Lagos. Died when I was 19. Industrial accident. Dejun nodded slowly. Private security in Lagos could mean a lot of things, most of them involving guns and people who needed killing. I'm sorry. Thank you, sir. Karen added vegetables to the pan, the sizzle filling the silence. Will there be anything else? There were about 1,000 questions Dejun wanted to ask. Why had she taken a job as a maid when she clearly had skills that could land her work in a dozen more lucrative, less demeaning fields? What had she been doing in London? What was she really doing here, in his headquarters, scrubbing floors and cataloging the fighting styles of trained killers? But he'd learned over the years that pushing too hard, too fast, was how you lost valuable assets. And Karen, whether she knew it or not, had just become very, very valuable. The vacation, he said instead. It's real. You won the bet, fair and square. Take the month. Hawaii, Bali, wherever. On me. Karen turned, surprise finally breaking through her professional mask. Sir, I was joking. I wasn't. Dejun met her eyes. You beat me. In front of my crew. That's worth something. That's worth a lot, actually. Shows them that underestimating people is dangerous. Good lesson. She studied him for a long moment. And when I come back? When you come back, we're going to have a different conversation. About what you do here. About what you could do here. He stood, straightening his shirt. But for now, enjoy your victory. You earned it. He was halfway to the door when Karen spoke again. Sir. Dejun turned. The injury to your right leg. You should see a physical therapist. The compensation pattern you've developed is going to cause problems with your lower back within 6 months if you don't address it. Dejun stared at her. Then he laughed again, shaking his head. Terrifying, he repeated. Absolutely terrifying. He left the kitchen, but his mind was already working. Minho would have her file within the hour. And then Dejun would know everything there was to know about Karen. Her history, her training, her secrets. Or at least, he'd know what was in the file. Something told him that the real story was much, much deeper. In the kitchen, Karen returned to her cooking, her expression neutral once more. But inside, her heart was hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She'd been careful for 3 years. So careful. Never drawing attention, never revealing more than necessary, always playing the role of the perfect, invisible servant. And then Dejun had pushed, had made it into a joke, and she'd gotten sloppy. No, not sloppy. Angry. 3 years of being dismissed, of being background noise, of cleaning up after men who treated her like furniture. It had built up like pressure in a sealed container. And when Dejun had offered her that bet, that smug, certain smile on his face, something inside her had snapped. She'd wanted to wipe that smile off his face. And she had. But now there would be questions. Dejun wasn't stupid. Arrogant, yes, but not stupid. He'd want to know more. He'd dig. And if he dug deep enough, he'd find things that Karen had spent 3 years burying. She focused on the vegetables, on the familiar rhythm of cooking. 1 step at a time. That's how you survived. 1 step, 1 breath, 1 day. The file Dejun would receive would tell him some truths. Her father had indeed worked private security. She had trained in Krav Maga and boxing. She had worked in London. What it wouldn't tell him was why she'd left London. It wouldn't tell him about the men who'd come for her in the middle of the night. It wouldn't tell him about the bodies she'd left behind. And it definitely wouldn't tell him that Karen wasn't even her real name. She stirred the vegetables, watching them brown and soften in the heat. 3 years. She'd had 3 years of peace, of anonymity, of pretending to be someone small and insignificant. That peace was over now. Outside, somewhere in the building, Minho was probably already making calls, pulling strings, accessing databases. Within hours, Dejun would know everything the file could tell him. And then the real game would begin. Karen took a breath, centering herself the way her father had taught her. Fear was useful, it kept you sharp. But panic would get you killed. She wasn't going to panic. She was going to finish making dinner, serve it with perfect professionalism, and then she was going to her quarters to prepare for whatever came next. Because something was coming. She could feel it in her bones, in the way the air had shifted after she'd walked out of that dojo. She'd broken character. She'd shown them what she could do. And in Dejun's world, people who could do things, really do things, didn't get to stay invisible for long. The question was, would he try to use her, or would he try to eliminate her? Karen suspected it would be the former. Dejun collected useful things the way some people collected art. And she just demonstrated that she was very, very useful. She finished the vegetables and moved to the next task, her hands steady, her mind racing. Hawaii sounded nice. A month away from this building, from these men, from the constant low-level tension that came with living among predators. But she wouldn't take it. Taking the vacation would mean leaving the board while the pieces were still in motion. And Karen had learned the hard way that you never ever turned your back on a game that wasn't finished. No, she'd stay. She'd face whatever Dejun threw at her. And if necessary, she'd remind him, again, that underestimating her was a mistake he couldn't afford to make twice. Min-ho found the discrepancy at 2:47 a.m. He'd been at it for 6 hours, fueled by energy drinks and the kind of manic focus that came from knowing your boss wanted answers yesterday. Karen's file had arrived within the first hour, a neat digital package from the agency, all official stamps and verified references. Everything checked out. Too well, actually. That was the first red flag. Min-ho had been doing background checks for the Dragontail Syndicate for 8 years. He knew what a Rayal file looked like. Messy, full of small inconsistencies, the occasional gap that needed explanation. Human lives were chaotic. They left trails that zigzagged and doubled back. Karen's file was a straight line. Lagos to London to Seoul. Each position perfectly timed, each reference glowing but generic. The kind of recommendations that said all the right things without actually saying anything. So Min-ho had started digging deeper. He'd called in favors from contacts in 3 countries, accessed databases that technically didn't exist, and cross-referenced every detail against immigration records, financial transactions, and social media footprints. And that's when he found it. The woman in the file, Karen Okonkwo, age 28, born in Lagos, Nigeria, existed. She had a birth certificate, school records, even a driver's license. But she died 4 years ago. Car accident on the M25 outside London. Closed casket funeral. Death certificate signed by a coroner who, Min-ho discovered after another hour of digging, had retired 6 months later and moved to a beach town in Thailand with enough money to suggest his retirement was very well funded. The woman currently making japchae in Dejun's kitchen was using a dead woman's identity. Min-ho sat back in his chair, the blue light from his monitors washing over his scarred face. He should have been surprised. He should have been concerned. Instead, he felt something uncomfortably close to admiration. Whoever she really was, she'd covered her tracks with the kind of precision that took resources, planning, and skills far beyond what any housekeeping agency required. He picked up his phone and called Dejun. Dejun answered on the second ring. "Tell me something interesting." "The woman cooking your dinner is dead." Min-ho heard the sound of rustling fabric, like Dejun was sitting up in bed. Or rather, the woman whose identity she's using is dead. Has been for 4 years. Silence. Then, you're sure? Death certificate. Funeral records. The works. Someone paid a lot of money to make sure that identity stayed viable long enough to establish a new one. Professional job. The kind of thing government agencies do when they're relocating assets. Or the kind of thing criminals do when they're running from something, Dejun said. His voice was sharp now, fully awake. What else? That's where it gets interesting. I can't find anything before Lagos. No birth records, no school enrollment, nothing. It's like she materialized into existence at age 15. Witness protection? Maybe. Or she's been building false identities since she was a teenager. Min-ho pulled up another screen, scanning the information. The London connection is real though. She worked at a private residence in Kensington for 18 months. High-end security, the kind of place that houses diplomats and billionaires who need discretion. Why would someone with that background end up scrubbing floors in Seoul? That, Min-ho said, is the question I can't answer. At least not yet. Whatever made her run, she ran far and she ran smart. Seoul is about as far from London as you can get without leaving the planet. De-jun was quiet for a moment. Min-ho could practically hear him thinking, weighing options, calculating risks. Keep digging. I want to know who she really is and what she's running from. Quietly. Don't spook her. Boss, if she's running from something big enough to fake her own death. Then she's either extremely dangerous or extremely valuable. Possibly both. There was a sound like De-jun was moving. Probably getting dressed. I'm coming in. Set up a meeting with her for first thing tomorrow. Professional, not threatening. I want to give her a chance to tell me the truth before I have to drag it out of her. And if she doesn't talk? De-jun's laugh was dark. Then we'll find out just how good she really is. Karen knew something was wrong the moment she entered the kitchen the next morning. It wasn't anything obvious. The space looked the same, immaculate counters, ingredients prepped for breakfast, the coffee maker already burbling away. But there was a tension in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks. De-jun was sitting at the island, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He was reading something on his tablet, his expression neutral, but his body language was different. More contained. More deliberate. He was treating her like a threat. "Good morning, sir," Karen said, her voice perfectly professional. "I wasn't expecting you this early. Shall I prepare your usual breakfast?" "Sit down, Karen." Not a request. A command. She sat, keeping her hands visible on the counter. Her posture relaxed but ready. Years of training had taught her how to look calm while every nerve in her body was screaming danger. De-jun set down the tablet and looked at her. Really looked at her, the way a jeweler examines a diamond to determine if it's real or fake. "I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. Who are you?" There it was. The moment she'd been dreading since she'd walked out of that dojo. Karen met his gaze steadily. "I'm your domestic logistics coordinator, sir. I've been working here for 3 years." "No." De-jun's voice was soft but edged with steel. "The woman whose name you're using has been dead for 4 years. So I'll ask again. Who are you?" Karen felt her heart rate spike, but her face remained calm. She'd prepared for this possibility, had rehearsed responses for different scenarios. The question was, how much did he know, and how much could she afford to tell him? "My name is Amara," she said quietly. "Amara Okoro. The identity is borrowed, yes, but the work I've done here is real. I've served this organization faithfully for 3 years. I've never stolen, never betrayed a confidence, never been anything but an asset. Why the false identity? Because the alternative was dying for real." The words came out harder than she'd intended. "I had a life in London. A good job, a small apartment, plans for the future. And then some very bad people decided I knew something I shouldn't. They came for me. I ran." De-jun leaned back, his fingers steepled under his chin. "What did you know?" Amara, because that's who she was now, the mask was off, chose her next words carefully. "I worked for a man named Harrison Whitmore. Officially, he was a venture capitalist. Unofficially, he was laundering money for half the organized crime syndicates in Europe. I didn't know that when I started. I just thought I was housekeeping for a rich eccentric. But you found out. I found a ledger, hidden in a false bottom of his desk drawer. I was looking for furniture polish." She allowed herself a bitter smile. "I'm very thorough about my work. I saw names, numbers, transactions that didn't make sense. I was smart enough to photograph it, stupid enough to think I could use it as insurance." De-jun's expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. They found out you had it. Whitmore had surveillance everywhere. Cameras I didn't know about. He saw me photograph the ledger. That night, 3 men came to my apartment. I wasn't supposed to survive. But you did. I killed 2 of them. The third one ran. Amara's voice was flat, emotionless. Facts, just facts. I took what money I had, contacted someone who specializes in new identities, and disappeared. I chose Seoul because it was far, because it was different, because I thought I could hide here. And the Krav Maga. The training. My father really was private security, but not the kind that stands around looking intimidating. He extracted people from dangerous situations. Hostages, witnesses, assets that needed to disappear. He taught me everything he knew because he said the world was full of men who would try to hurt me, and he wanted me to be able to hurt them back. The kitchen was silent except for the soft gurgling of the coffee maker. Amara watched Dejun's face, trying to read which way he'd fall. Would he see her as a liability, someone who brought dangerous attention? Or would he see the opportunity? Finally, Dejun spoke. Do you still have the photographs? The ledger. Encrypted and stored in 3 separate cloud locations. Accessible only by me. It's my life insurance policy. Smart. Dejun stood, walking to the coffee maker and pouring 2 cups. He slid one across the counter to her. Here's my problem, Amara. You lied to me for 3 years. You brought a false identity into my organization. That's normally the kind of thing I'd have someone killed for. Amara's hand didn't shake as she picked up the coffee cup. I understand. But Dejun took a sip of his own coffee, his eyes never leaving hers. You've also proven yourself to be loyal, discreet, and significantly more capable than you let on. That has value. And I'm a businessman. I understand the concept of mutual benefit. What are you proposing? I'm proposing we start over. You come clean about everything, and I mean everything. Your real background, your real skills, what you're really running from. In exchange, I offer you protection. The Dragontail Syndicate has reached that your identity specialist couldn't dream of. If Whitmore or his people come looking, they'll find a wall they can't climb. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Dejun smiled. It wasn't the predatory smirk from the dojo. This was something sharper, more calculating. I get someone with your skill set working for me properly. Not as a maid, though I have to say you're exceptional at removing bloodstains, but as something more useful. Security consultant. Trainer for my people. Someone who can spot weaknesses in our operation because you've spent 3 years watching us like we're a nature documentary. Amara considered this. It was a deal, but deals in this world always had fine print written in blood. And if I say no, then you take your month in Hawaii, and when you come back, we'll pretend this conversation never happened. You'll go back to being Karen the maid, and I'll go back to pretending I don't know you're someone else. But he set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. That ledger of yours? It stays insurance. Because if you're lying to me about why you're really here, if you're working for someone else, that insurance policy becomes a target on your back. Mine, specifically. It was a threat wrapped in an offer wrapped in a warning. Classic Dejun. Amara looked at the coffee in her hands, at the steam rising from the dark liquid. 3 years she'd been invisible. 3 years of safety purchased with silence and submission. This conversation was an ending, one way or another. The question was, which ending did she want? I need time to think, she said finally. You have until tonight. Dinner is at 7 as always. Give me your answer then. Dejun picked up his tablet and headed for the door, then paused. And Amara. The Hawaii offer is real, regardless of what you decide. You earned it. You embarrassed me, taught my crew a valuable lesson, and turned out to be far more interesting than I ever imagined. That's worth a vacation. He left, and Amara was alone in the kitchen with her coffee and her choices. She sat there for a long time, thinking about fathers who taught daughters to fight, about ledgers hidden in desk drawers, about men who came in the night and the ones who didn't leave. She thought about 3 years of playing small, of being invisible, of cleaning up other people's messes while her own past stalked her like a shadow. And she thought about what her father had told her, the last time she'd seen him alive. Hiding is survival, Amara. But surviving isn't living. At some point, you have to decide if you're going to spend your life running, or if you're going to turn around and face what's chasing you. She'd been running for 4 years. Maybe it was time to stop. Amara spent the day doing what she always did, working. She cleaned the third-floor offices, scrubbed the blood old, probably a week, from the grout in the executive bathroom, and reorganized the linen closet with the kind of precision that would make a military quartermaster weep with joy. Routine was armor. Routine was control. And right now, with her carefully constructed world teetering on the edge of collapse, she needed both. But her mind was elsewhere. DeJune's offer played on repeat in her head, each word weighted with implications. Protection in exchange for transparency. Safety for service. It was a good deal objectively. The Dragontail Syndicate had resources she couldn't match alone. Connections, muscle, the kind of organizational infrastructure that could make a person disappear or make their enemies wish they'd never been born. But deals like this always came with hidden costs. She was folding towels in the supply room when Jae-sung found her. "Boss wants to see you," he said, leaning against the doorframe. He was smaller than the other enforcers, barely 5'9", but he had the kind of wiry strength that came from growing up fighting for everything. His eyes were sharp, assessing. Conference room. Now. Amara set down the towel she'd been creasing into perfect thirds. "I thought the meeting was at dinner." Plans changed. Jae-sung's expression was unreadable. "He said to bring you immediately." Not a request. She followed him through the corridors, her mind racing. This wasn't the script. DeJune had given her until tonight. Changing the timeline meant something had happened, something that required immediate response. The conference room was on the 4th floor, a glass-walled space with a view of Seoul's sprawling cityscape. DeJune stood at the head of the long table, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up. Min-ho was there too, along with 3 other men Amara recognized, senior members of the syndicate's inner circle. And on the screen mounted to the wall was a photograph. Amara's blood turned to ice. It was Harrison Whitmore. Older than she remembered, his hair more gray than brown now, but unmistakably him. The man whose ledger she'd photographed. The man who'd sent killers to her apartment 4 years ago. "Sit down, Amara," DeJune said. His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension that made the air feel thinner. She sat. DeJune gestured to the screen. 20 minutes ago, we received intel that this man, Harrison Whitmore, is coming to Seoul. Tomorrow. He's arranged meetings with several of our competitors. Arms deals, apparently. He's looking to expand his operations into the Asian market. Amara's hands gripped the edge of the table. "He doesn't know I'm here." "Are you sure?" Minho's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Because the timing is awfully convenient. You show up in Seoul 3 years ago using a dead woman's identity. Now the man you're running from suddenly decides Seoul is his next business opportunity? That's a hell of a coincidence. I've been careful. I've never used my real name, never contacted anyone from my old life, never left a digital trail that could." "Careful isn't perfect," DeJune interrupted. "And in our business, the difference between careful and perfect is usually measured in body bags." Amara forced herself to breathe, to think. Whitmore in Seoul. It could be coincidence. The city was a major hub for international crime after all. Or it could be something worse. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking if this is a problem." DeJune's eyes were hard. "If we're about to have a very wealthy, very connected British criminal show up on our doorstep looking for a woman who's been cleaning our floors for 3 years. Because if he finds you here, that becomes our problem. And I don't like problems I didn't sign up for. I can leave." The words came out before she could stop them. "Tonight. I'll disappear, go somewhere else. You never have to." "No." DeJune's voice was flat, final. "That's not how this works. You're here in my house under my roof. That makes you mine. And I don't let people take what's mine without consequences. The possessive phrasing should have bothered her. Instead, Amara felt something unexpected: relief. Then what do you want me to do? Dejun exchanged a look with Min-ho, some silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to Amara. I want you to tell me everything about Whitmore. His habits, his security, his weaknesses. Everything you learned while you were working for him. Why? Because if he's coming to Seoul to do business with our competitors, that makes him a problem for reasons that have nothing to do with you. And problems, Amara, are opportunities in disguise. Dejun's smile was cold and calculating. You wanted to know what you'd be giving me in exchange for protection? Here's your first assignment. Help me understand the man I'm about to go to war with. Amara looked around the table. 5 of the most dangerous men in Seoul, all watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and interest. This was the moment. The fulcrum. She could refuse, could walk away, could return to running. Or she could do what her father had taught her. Turn and face what was chasing her. He has a tell, she said quietly. When he's lying, he touches his left cufflink. 3 quick taps, like he's adjusting it. But he only does it when the lie is important, when there's real money at stake. Dejun leaned forward. What else? His security detail is XSAS, highly trained, but they're predictable. They sweep rooms clockwise, always. It's in their training. And Whitmore is paranoid about food. He never eats anything he hasn't watched being prepared. Thinks everyone's trying to poison him. Smart paranoia, Min-ho muttered. His meetings always happen in public places. Restaurants, hotel lobbies, anywhere with multiple exits. He doesn't trust confined spaces. Amara's voice grew stronger as she spoke, memories flooding back. He carries 2 phones. One for legitimate business, one for everything else. The burner is an old Nokia pre-smartphone. Harder to track, harder to hack. Does he travel with the ledger? Dejun asked. No. He keeps it in a safe deposit box at a bank in Zurich. I only saw it because he'd brought it home to make updates. He's meticulous about records, needs to see everything physical written down. Doesn't trust digital completely. For the next hour, Amara talked. She described Whitmore's routines, his associates, his weaknesses. She sketched out the layout of his London residence from memory, marked the locations of cameras and safe rooms. She detailed every scrap of information she'd accumulated in 18 months of invisible servitude. And as she talked, she watched the men around the table. Watched their expressions shift from suspicion to interest to something approaching respect. She was giving them weapons and they knew it. Finally, Dejun held up a hand. That's enough for now. He looked at her, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, his expression softened slightly. You did good. This is useful intelligence. What happens now? Amara asked. Now we prepare. Whitmore arrives tomorrow at 2 p.m. He's staying at the Shilla Hotel, meeting with the Jade Brotherhood at 7. We're going to make sure that meeting doesn't go the way he planned. Dejun stood, buttoning his cuffs with practiced ease. Min-ho, I want surveillance on Whitmore the moment he lands. Jae-sung, reach out to our contact at the Shilla, see what room he's in, what security arrangements he's made. The men nodded, already moving. Amara. Dejun's voice stopped her as she started to stand. Stay. The others filed out, leaving them alone in the conference room. Through the glass walls, Seoul glittered in the afternoon sun, millions of lives unaware of the chess match being played in rooms like this. Dejun walked to the window, hands in his pockets. You haven't given me your answer yet. About my offer. I thought I just did. Amara gestured to the now empty screen where Whitmore's face had been. I gave you everything I know about him. That was survival instinct. Self-preservation. I'm talking about something else. He turned to face her. I'm talking about whether you're ready to stop being a victim. The word hit harder than any punch. I'm not a victim. Aren't you? Dejun's voice wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. You've spent 4 years running from a man who tried to kill you once. You've built your entire life around hiding, around making yourself small and invisible so he can't find you. That's not strength, Amara. That's just a slower way of dying. She wanted to argue, to push back, but the words stuck in her throat. Because he was right. She'd survived, yes. But survival wasn't the same as living. What are you offering? She asked quietly. I'm offering you a chance to take your life back. Not by hiding, not by running, but by turning the tables. Dejun walked back to the table, placed both hands flat on its surface. Whitmore is in Seoul. He's vulnerable, far from his power base, in territory he doesn't control. This is your opportunity. Help me handle him and you'll never have to run from him again. Handle him how? Dejun's smile was sharp as broken glass. That depends on you. We can humiliate him, bankrupt him, or, if you prefer, we can make sure he never threatens anyone again. Your choice. Amara's heart was pounding. This was what she'd wanted, deep down, for 4 years. Not safety. Not hiding. But revenge. Justice. The chance to face the man who'd turned her into a ghost. I want him to know, she said, her voice low and hard. I want him to see my face and know that I'm the reason his world is burning. I want him to understand that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of his life. Dejun's smile widened. Now that, he said, is an answer I can work with. What would you do if the person who tried to destroy your life walked into your city? Would you run again, or would you finally stand and fight? That evening, Amara didn't make dinner. Instead, she sat in the syndicate's training room, the same dojo where she'd put Dejun on his back, and ran through forms. Punch, kick, pivot. Her body moved through the patterns her father had drilled into her, each motion precise and controlled. She was preparing, not just physically but mentally. Tomorrow, Harrison Whitmore would arrive in Seoul. Tomorrow, the woman he'd tried to kill would be waiting. She thought about the girl she'd been 4 years ago. Scared, desperate, running through London streets with blood on her hands and terror in her heart. That girl had made it this far through sheer will and careful planning. She'd survived. But the woman in this dojo, moving through combat forms with lethal grace, wasn't that girl anymore. She was something harder. Something sharper. Something dangerous. The door opened. Minho stepped in, carrying a folder. Boss thought you should see this. Latest intel on Whitmore's security detail. 3 men, all ex-military, all carrying. They'll sweep the hotel room before he enters. Standard protocol. Amara took the folder, scanning the photographs and dossiers. She recognized one face. Marcus Chen, Whitmore's head of security. The one who'd been at her apartment that night. The one who'd gotten away. This one, she said, tapping Chen's photo. He knows my face. If he sees me, he'll recognize me immediately. Then we make sure he doesn't see you until it's too late. Minho's expression was unreadable. Boss is putting together a plan. He wants you in the room when we brief tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. sharp. I'll be there. Minho turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you did the right thing today. Telling us about Whitmore. Most people in your position would have run. I'm tired of running. Good. Minho's scarred face creased into something that might have been a smile. Running is boring. Fighting is more fun. After he left, Amara continued her forms. But now there was something different in her movements. Not just precision but purpose. She was done being invisible. She was done being afraid. Harrison Whitmore had made her a ghost 4 years ago. Tomorrow she was going to return the favor. The briefing room at 7 a.m. was thick with cigarette smoke and testosterone. Amara arrived exactly on time, carrying a tray of coffee she'd prepared in the kitchen out of habit. The men around the table, Dejun, Minho, Jae-sung, and 4 others she recognized as the syndicate's tactical team, looked up as she entered. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to skepticism. She set down the tray and took the empty seat at Dejun's right hand. Gentlemen, Dejun began, stubbing out his cigarette in a crystal ashtray. We have approximately 7 hours before Harrison Whitmore touches down at Incheon. I want to use that time to make sure we're all singing from the same hymn book. He clicked a remote, and the wall screen came to life. Whitmore's face appeared, along with a timeline of his movements. Whitmore lands at 2 p.m. He'll be met by his security detail and driven to the Sheila Hotel. He has a reservation for the Imperial Suite, top floor, corner unit. At 7 p.m., he's scheduled to meet with representatives from the Jade Brotherhood in the hotel's private dining room. The Jade Brotherhood? Jae-sung's eyebrows rose. They've been trying to muscle into our territory for months. Exactly. Which is why this meeting is about more than just old grudges. Dejun's gaze swept the room. Whitmore is here to broker an arms deal. High-end weapons, military-grade hardware. If the Jade Brotherhood gets access to that kind of firepower, our current détente becomes a full-scale war. One we might not win. The room went quiet. Amara could feel the shift in energy, the weight of what Dejun was saying settling over everyone like a heavy blanket. So we have two objectives, Dejun continued. 1. Prevent the deal from happening. 2. Send a message to both Whitmore and the Jade Brotherhood that Seoul is our territory, and outsiders who try to change that face consequences. Minho leaned forward. What kind of message are we talking about? Dejun's smile was cold. The permanent kind. But we need to be smart about it. Whitmore is connected. He disappears, people notice. So we need to make it look like something other than what it is. An accident, Amara said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She met their stares evenly. Whitmore is paranoid, but he's also predictable. He follows patterns. We use those patterns against him. Make it look like his own security precautions failed. A gas leak in his suite, maybe. Or a structural failure. Something that keeps the heat off the dragontail and makes it look like bad luck. Dejun nodded slowly. Go on. Amara stood, walking to the screen. His security team will sweep the suite before he enters. They'll check for bugs, weapons, explosives. But they won't check the infrastructure. The ventilation system, the water pipes, the electrical conduits. Those are supposed to be the hotel's responsibility. But hotels can be bribed, Minho said, catching on. We get to the maintenance staff, make some adjustments. Exactly. Carbon monoxide is colorless, odorless. A slow leak from a faulty heater wouldn't be detected until it's too late. Whitmore and his security detail go to sleep and never wake up. Tragic accident. The hotel gets investigated, maybe pays a fine. But nobody looks at us. Jae-sung was nodding. Clean. I like it. There's a problem, one of the other men said. His name was Sung Min, a logistics specialist with a reputation for finding flaws in plans. The meeting with the Jade Brotherhood is at 7. If Whitmore is dead by then, the Brotherhood will know something's wrong. They'll cancel, probably go to ground. Then we don't kill him before the meeting, Amara said. We kill him after. Dejun's eyes gleamed. Explain. Whitmore goes to the meeting. Everything seems normal. But while he's downstairs making his pitch, we're in his suite making modifications. When he comes back exhausted from negotiations, looking forward to sleep. She gestured with her hand, a downward motion. Lights out. And the Jade Brotherhood? They'll be upset they lost their weapons connection. But they won't know we're responsible. As far as they're concerned, their potential partner had a run of bad luck. Amara returned to her seat. No war. No retaliation. Just an unfortunate accident that happens to benefit us. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Dejun started laughing. It wasn't his usual controlled chuckle, but something genuine, almost delighted. You've been wasted cleaning floors, he said, shaking his head. Absolutely wasted. Minho pulled up schematics of the Sheila Hotel on his laptop. I can get us building plans, ventilation diagrams. We'll need someone who knows HVAC systems. I know a guy, Sung Min said. Works maintenance at 3 of the major hotels. For the right price, he'll do whatever we need. Get him on standby, Dejun ordered. Then he looked at Amara. You're sure about this? Once we start down this road, there's no turning back. Whitmore dies tonight, and you're part of that. Not just witness, participant. Amara thought about the night 4 years ago. The sound of her apartment door being kicked in. The flash of muzzle fire. The wet thud of a knife entering flesh. She'd killed 2 men that night in desperate self-defense, and the weight of it had haunted her dreams ever since. But this was different. This wasn't panic. This was choice. "I'm sure," she said. "Then we have a plan." Dejun stood, and the others followed. "Min-ho, coordinate with the hotel contact. Jae-sung, I want eyes on Whitmore from the moment he lands. Sung-min, get your HVAC guy ready to move. Everyone else, standard protocol. Stay alert, stay mobile, and if anything goes sideways, we abort and regroup." The men filed out, already pulling out phones and making calls. Amara started to follow, but Dejun caught her arm. "A word," he said. When they were alone, he released her and walked to the window. Seoul spread out below them, a concrete jungle of ambition and survival. "You know what you're becoming, don't you?" "What do you mean?" "When you walked into this building 3 years ago, you were running from violence. Now you're planning it." He turned to face her. "That's a line most people can't uncross. Once you're on this side of it, you're here permanently. I crossed that line 4 years ago when I killed those men in my apartment." "No. That was survival. This is something else." Dejun's expression was serious, almost concerned. "This is choosing to be the predator instead of the prey. I need you to understand what that means. Because if you help us kill Whitmore tonight, you're not just settling a score. You're joining a world where settling scores is Tuesday." Amara looked at him, this man who'd built an empire on violence and strategy, who wore expensive suits and had blood under his manicured fingernails. She thought about the life she'd left behind in London, the small apartment and the quiet dreams of something normal. That life was dead. Had been dead for 4 years. "I understand," she said. "And I'm ready." Dejun studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then. Welcome to the Dragon Tail, Amara. Try not to get killed on your first day." The afternoon crawled by like a wounded animal. Amara went through the motions of her usual routine, but her mind was elsewhere. She dusted shelves she'd dusted yesterday, reorganized closets that didn't need reorganizing. Physical tasks to keep her hands busy while her brain ran through the plan again and again, looking for flaws, for variables, for the moment where everything could go wrong. At 2:17 p.m., her phone buzzed. A text from Min-ho. "Eagle has landed." Whitmore was in Seoul. At 3:45 p.m., Eagle in nest. He'd checked into the hotel. At 6:30 p.m., Eagle flying south. He was heading to the meeting. Each update tightened the knot in Amara's stomach. This was really happening. After 4 years of running, of hiding, of building a life in the shadows, she was about to step into the light and take back her power. At 6:50 p.m., Jae-sung picked her up in a black sedan with tinted windows. "Boss wants you on site," he said as she climbed into the passenger seat. "Says you should see this through." They drove through Seoul's evening traffic, the city alive with lights and movement. Amara watched it all slide past the window, thinking about the thousands of people out there living normal lives. Going to dinner, meeting friends, heading home to families. Simple lives, uncomplicated by ledgers and assassination plots. She didn't envy them. Not anymore. The Shilla Hotel rose like a monument to wealth and privilege, all glass and steel and perfectly manicured gardens. Jae-sung parked in the underground garage, and they took a service elevator to the 18th floor. Min-ho was waiting in a supply closet that had been converted into a makeshift command center. Laptops, radio equipment, and a live video feed from several cameras showed different angles of Whitmore's suite. "Status?" Jae-sung asked. Sungmin's guy finished the modifications 20 minutes ago. Heaters compromised. Carbon monoxide will start building up about 30 minutes after it's turned on. Whitmore security swept the room at 6. Found nothing because there's nothing to find yet. Min-ho gestured to the screen. Meeting should wrap up around 9. He'll come back, probably shower, Turn on the heat because the room will feel cold, and then it's just a waiting game. Where's the security detail? Amara asked. 2 rooms down. Standard protocol. They give him privacy but stay close enough to respond if needed. They'll be asleep by 11. We made sure their minibar was stocked with premium vodka, compliments of the hotel. Minho's grin was sharp. They won't wake up even if there's a fire alarm. Amara looked at the screen, at the empty suite. Whitmore's luggage was visible in the bedroom. Expensive leather pieces monogrammed with his initials. In a few hours, that suite would become a tomb. You okay? Jae-sung asked quietly. Fine, Amara said. And surprisingly, she was. No second thoughts, no moral crisis. Just a cold, clear certainty that this was justice. Delayed, perhaps. But justice nonetheless. At 8:47 p.m., Minho's radio crackled. Meetings breaking up. Eagle returning to nest. ETA 12 minutes. This was it. They watched the screens in silence as Harrison Whitmore entered his suite, followed by his head of security, Marcus Chen. Chen did a quick sweep, checking closets, bathrooms, under the bed, while Whitmore poured himself a scotch from the suite's bar. Amara's hands clenched into fists as she watched Chen work. The man who'd been in her apartment. The man who'd probably pulled the trigger that killed the neighbor who'd tried to help her. He moved with professional efficiency, completely unaware that he was checking for threats while standing inside the real danger. After 5 minutes, Chen said something to Whitmore, the cameras had no audio, and left. Whitmore locked the door behind him, loosened his tie, and walked to the thermostat. Here we go, Minho murmured. Whitmore adjusted the temperature. The heater kicked on with a soft whoosh that Amara couldn't hear but could imagine. Invisible death beginning its slow work. Whitmore moved to the bedroom, started unpacking. He was relaxed, unhurried. A man who'd just concluded successful business and was looking forward to a good night's sleep. He had no idea these were his last conscious hours. How long? Jae-sung asked. 2 hours, maybe 3. Depends on his metabolism, how much he breathes. Minho checked his watch. By midnight it'll be over. Amara settled into a chair, never taking her eyes off the screen. She would watch. All of it. She owed herself that much, to see the end of the man who'd tried to end her. Whitmore showered, changed into pajamas that probably cost more than Amara's monthly salary, and climbed into bed with his phone. He scrolled for a while, probably checking emails or news, the blue light illuminating his face. Then the phone slipped from his fingers. His eyes closed, and Harrison Whitmore went to sleep for the last time. Time moved like honey in winter. Amara sat in the supply closet turned command center, watching Harrison Whitmore sleep. On the screen, his chest rose and fell with decreasing regularity. Each breath drew in more poison. Each exhalation brought him closer to the end. She should have felt something. Triumph, maybe. Or guilt. Or the savage satisfaction of revenge finally claimed. Instead, she felt oddly hollow, like a container that had been filled with fear and rage for so long that now, with those emotions draining away, there was nothing left but empty space. You want coffee? Jae-sung asked, his voice soft in the dim room. No. Thank you. Minho was monitoring vital signs through a contact they had on Whitmore's security detail, one of Chen's men who'd been on the Dragontail payroll for 6 months. Heart rates dropping. 62 beats per minute. Down from his normal 78. 11:47 p.m. Whitmore stirred in his sleep, one hand moving to his chest. On the thermal imaging camera, his body temperature was cooling. The carbon monoxide was binding to his hemoglobin, starving his organs of oxygen. Should be any minute now, Minho said. Amara leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the screen. This was it. The moment she'd been waiting for, whether she'd admitted it to herself or not, for 4 long years. 11:53 p.m. Whitmore's breathing became labored. Even through the silent camera feed, Amara could see his distress. His fingers clutched at the sheets. 11:56 p.m. His movements stopped. The room, both the one on screen and the one Amara sat in, was utterly silent. Minho checked his equipment. cross-referencing with the data from their planted contact. Heart rate 0. No respiratory movement. He's gone. Just like that. No dramatic final words, no sudden realization, no chance to fight back. Harrison Whitmore, international criminal and arms dealer, had simply gone to sleep in an expensive hotel suite and never woken up. What about Chen and the others? Jae-sung asked. Still out cold in their rooms. The vodka we gave them was special. They'll wake up around 7 a.m. with splitting headaches and no memory of anything after their third drink. Min-ho started shutting down equipment. Hotel staff will find Whitmore around 9 when he doesn't respond to his wake-up call. Medical examiner will determine carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater. By the time anyone thinks to ask questions, we'll be ghosts. Amara stood slowly, her legs stiff from sitting. I need air. She walked out of the supply closet and down the corridor to a window that overlooked Seoul. The city glittered below, indifferent to the small death that had just occurred in one of its luxury hotels. People were still out there, living their lives, completely unaware that the balance of power in their city's underworld had just shifted. Footsteps approached from behind. She didn't turn around. It's done, Dejun said. He came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets. How do you feel? I don't know yet, Amara admitted. I thought I'd feel something. Relief, maybe. Or satisfaction. But it just feels empty. That's normal. Revenge doesn't heal wounds the way people think it will. It just closes them. Dejun looked at her reflection in the glass. But closed is better than bleeding. You can live with closed. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city breathe. What happens now? Amara asked. Now we wait for the official discovery. Make sure nothing ties back to us. Then the Jade Brotherhood learns their weapons connection died in an unfortunate accident, and they quietly withdraw their expansion plans because nobody wants to operate in a city where bad luck seems contagious. He smiled slightly. And you decide what you want to do next. I already decided. I'm staying. Working for you properly. Not as a maid. Are you sure? Because there's no going back from this, Amara. You're part of it now. When the police investigate Whitmore's death, when his associates start asking questions, your name might come up. You'll need to be ready for that. I'm ready. She turned to face him. I've been ready since the moment you made me that offer. I'm done hiding. Done being afraid. Whatever comes next, I'll handle it. Dejun studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right then. Welcome to the Dragon Tail, officially this time. We'll start you on security analysis. Have you work with Min-ho on identifying weaknesses in our operations. Your ability to observe and catalog will be valuable. What about Chen and the other security guards? What about them? They'll figure out eventually that the heater was tampered with. Chen especially, he's not stupid. He'll know this wasn't an accident. Dejun's smile widened. Let him know. Let him suspect. As long as he can't prove anything, suspicion is just paranoia. And paranoia makes people sloppy. He checked his watch. It's late. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be busy. We'll need to monitor the situation, make sure our story holds. He started to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Amara. That month in Hawaii is still on the table. After tonight, you've more than earned it. Think about taking it once things settle down. You'll need the distance to process all this. After he left, Amara returned to watching the city. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights and concrete, Harrison Whitmore's body was cooling in an expensive bed. Somewhere, Marcus Chen was sleeping off drugged vodka, unaware that his employer was dead. Somewhere, the Jade Brotherhood was probably celebrating what they thought was a successful negotiation, not knowing their plans had already crumbled. And here, in a hotel corridor, Amara Okoro stood taller than she had in 4 years. She thought about her father, about the lessons he'd taught her. Fight smarter, not harder. Use your opponent's strength against them. And never, ever let them see you coming. She'd done all 3 tonight. Her phone buzzed. A text from Min-ho. Clean exit. All equipment removed. No trace. Good work. Amara allowed herself a small smile. Good work indeed. She took the service elevator down to the garage where Jae-sung was waiting with the car. The drive back to the Dragontail headquarters was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Can I ask you something? Jae-sung said as they pulled into the underground parking. Sure. Do you regret it? Killing those men in London, killing Whitmore tonight. Amara considered the question. I regret that I had to. I regret that we live in a world where violence is sometimes the only answer. But I don't regret surviving. And I don't regret making sure Whitmore couldn't hurt anyone else. Jae-sung nodded slowly. That's a good answer. Better than most people in this life can manage. The next morning, Amara was in the kitchen making breakfast when the news broke. The television in the corner was tuned to a local news station, and at 9:47 a.m., the anchor's expression turned somber. Breaking news from the Sheila Hotel, where prominent British businessman Harrison Whitmore was found dead this morning in his suite. Police are investigating, but early reports suggest carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heating unit. Hotel management has issued a statement expressing their deepest condolences and has shut down all rooms on the 18th floor pending a full safety inspection. Amara cracked eggs into a pan, her movements steady and controlled. On the screen, footage showed police cars outside the hotel, medical examiners wheeling out a body bag, and a shaken hotel manager reading from a prepared statement. Tragic, Minho said, walking into the kitchen. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, watching the news. Really makes you think about how fragile life is. One faulty heater and poof. Gone. Terrible luck, Amara agreed, plating the eggs. The worst. Minho's eyes glinted with dark humor. I heard the Jade Brotherhood is already looking for alternative suppliers. Apparently they're superstitious about doing business in buildings where people die mysteriously. Imagine that. Dejun entered, dressed in a navy suit, his hair still damp from a shower. He glanced at the television, his expression neutral. Any complications? None, Minho reported. Chen and the other guards are being questioned, but they've got nothing to tell. They were in their rooms, asleep. The hotel's maintenance records show the heater in Whitmore's suite was flagged for replacement 2 months ago, but the work order got lost in bureaucracy. Classic institutional negligence. And our maintenance friend? Paid and on a plane to Bangkok. He'll stay there for 6 months, all expenses covered, until the investigation closes. By the time he comes back, nobody will remember his face. Dejun accepted a plate from Amara with a nod of thanks. Good. Keep monitoring the situation, but it looks like we're clear. He took a bite of eggs, then looked at Amara. How are you doing? Fine. Surprisingly fine, actually. Good. Because I have your first official assignment. He pulled out his phone, showing her a photograph of a man in his 40s, expensively dressed, with the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms. This is Takeshi Yamamoto. He runs a shipping company that we suspect is being used to move contraband, not ours, through Busan. I need you to analyze his operation, find the weak points. Tell me how we can either take it over or shut it down. Amara studied the photograph. When do you need the analysis? End of the week. Minho will give you access to all our intelligence on him. Personnel files, shipping manifests, surveillance footage. I want to know everything. His patterns, his security, where he's vulnerable. Consider it done. After breakfast, Amara went to her quarters. No longer the small room she'd occupied as a maid, but a proper apartment on the 5th floor with actual furniture and a view that didn't face a brick wall. Dejun had insisted on the upgrade, saying that members of his inner circle didn't sleep in closets. She sat at the desk and opened her laptop, pulling up the files Minho had sent over. Takeshi Yamamoto stared back at her from the screen, unaware that his operation was being dissected by someone who'd just orchestrated the death of an international arms dealer. Amara's fingers flew over the keyboard, taking notes, cross-referencing data, building a profile. This was what she was good at: observation, analysis, finding the small details that revealed larger truths. She'd done it for 3 years as a maid, watching the Dragontail's operations from the inside. Now she was doing it officially, with access to resources and information she'd never had before. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky. Amara barely noticed. At 6 p.m., there was a knock on her door. She looked up, surprised to find Dejun standing there with 2 bottles of soju and a slight smile. "I figured you might want company," he said. "First successful operation deserves a celebration." Amara gestured him in. He settled into the chair across from her desk, pouring soju into 2 small glasses. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To closed wounds," Amara countered. They drank. "I've been thinking," Dejun said after a moment, "about what you said in the dojo. That you'd watched us for 3 years, cataloging everything. That level of attention to detail is rare. Most people see what they expect to see. You see what's actually there. My father taught me that. He said survival depends on noticing what other people miss." "Smart man." Dejun poured another round. "I'm curious though. In 3 years of watching US, what did you learn about me?" Amara considered the question. It was a test, she realized. He wanted to know if she'd been paying attention to him specifically, if she understood the man she was now working for. "You're left-handed, but you've trained yourself to fight equally well with both hands. You have a tell when you're about to make a major decision. You tap your right index finger against your thumb 3 times, like you're counting to 3 before committing. You drink whiskey when you're relaxed and vodka when you're stressed. And you have a photograph in your office desk drawer that you look at sometimes when you think no one's watching. A woman. Your mother, I think, based on the resemblance." Dejun's expression was unreadable. "Anything else?" "You're lonelier than you let anyone see. You've built this empire, surrounded yourself with loyal men, but there's a distance you maintain. Like you're afraid that if anyone gets too close, they'll see something you don't want them to see." The room was quiet. Dejun downed his soju, then refilled both glasses. "My mother died when I was 12, he said finally. "Cancer. My father wasn't equipped to deal with a child alone. So I raised myself mostly. Built this from nothing because I refused to be helpless ever again." He met her eyes. "You're right about the loneliness. It's the price of command. The moment you show weakness, show that you need someone, it becomes a target." "I understand that," Amara said softly. "I've been alone a long time too. Maybe we don't have to be." Dejun's voice was careful, tentative in a way she'd never heard from him before. Maybe that's what this is. 2 people who've survived by staying isolated, learning to trust someone else for a change. Amara looked at him, really looked at him. Not the Mafia boss, not the ruthless strategist, but the man underneath. The one who kept his mother's photograph hidden in a drawer. The one who'd given her a chance when he could have just eliminated a threat. "Maybe," she agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking soju and watching the sun set over Seoul. 2 survivors, 2 strategists, 2 people who'd learned to weaponize their loneliness. But maybe not anymore. Maybe this was what it felt like to finally stop running. "So here's where I'm leaving you today, my beautiful family." Amara just made the biggest decision of her life, to stop running and face the man who tried to kill her. Harrison Whitmore is coming to Seoul, completely unaware that the woman he thought he'd destroyed is waiting for him in the shadows. But here's what I want you to think about. What happens when Whitmore walks into that hotel room? Does Amara's plan actually work, or does something go terribly wrong? What if Whitmore recognizes her somehow? What if Marcus Chen, his head of security, spots her first? And most importantly, when Whitmore takes his last breath, will Amara feel the closure she's been chasing for 4 years, or will she discover that revenge is just another kind of prison? Drop your predictions in the comments. Tell me what you think happens when the maid finally faces her monster. Do you think she'll go through with it? Do you think Dejun can be trusted? And what about that ledger she still has hidden? Will that come back to haunt her? Hit that like button if you're invested in Amara's story, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and share this with someone who needs to hear about a woman who refused to stay invisible. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone's been ignoring. I'll see you in the next one, where everything changes. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, stay blessed, stay bold, and remember, never underestimate the quiet ones. They're usually the ones planning your downfall.